Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
Foundations.
Very much has a lot to do with identity. And so poor Joseph has his identity, his position, his standing, his status, everything taken away from him. Clothing, yes, but everything completely stripped and twice.
That's right.
Foundations. Understanding the Jewish foundations of our Christian faith. With Robbo Robinson and Mandy Warby.
In the last program, we began looking at the places in the Bible where words or themes repeat themselves, and that those repeats are not because the authors weren't graced with broader vocabularies. The repeat of words, symbols and themes to the Jewish mindset means that there's significance and even hidden meaning that needs to be uncovered. We looked at one example last time, and in this program we're going to look at another example, also from the life of Joseph.
Yeah, because we started off by looking at, you mentioned Jude and how he repeated the word ungodly to describe a particular group of people. And yet each of those words had significant difference to them to express the complete, on every level, godlessness of those people. And then we looked at Joseph and how the sun, the moon and the stars represent Jacob and his wives and all of his sons representing the nation of Israel. And then you see it again in Revelation. It's kind of fun. But there is another example from Joseph's life. I love the story of Joseph.
Yeah.
Joseph is an extraordinary character, and I love him, and yet I don't at the same time, because he's like, his example is just, it's almost like perfection personified, and it's almost unattainable. Such a great example. But I guess the most common or well-known aspect of Joseph was his coat of many colours.
Yeah, that's right.
And you think, why was that so important?
Well, we read about this in Genesis 37, verses 3 to 4. It says, "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all of his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a vari-coloured tunic. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, and so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms."
It's like it was Joseph's fault, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
But boy, oh boy, what a parenting lesson.
So, of course, we know the story that unfolds from this point on. You know, the brothers were out looking after sheep. Israel sends Joseph out to check on them, see how they're going. And when they see him coming, their hatred for him is so high that they actually were going to kill him at first. And then they thought, oh no, let's not kill him. We'll just sell him as a slave, which is,
I mean, he is, after all, our brother.
Oh, that's
didn't
right,
they say?
exactly,
Like,
yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Like, what were they thinking?
Yeah.
Anyway, so he was sold into slavery to Midianite traders and ended up in Egypt working for Potiphar. So he ends up, once again, sort of, rises to the top. He's running the whole household and everything for Potiphar. Basically, Potiphar's only concern was what was he going to eat on the day.
Yeah.
And everything else was up to Joseph. But Potiphar's wife, of course, takes an interest in him and was trying to seduce him. And she said, come and lie with me. But he had great character and said no to that. But, of course, she stole his jacket as he ran away from her, and she accused him of rape, and he ended up in prison.
When I think of Joseph's story, my heart goes out to him, stripped twice.
Yeah.
It's not his fault his father was not wise in his parenting, playing favourites, but to be despised to the point where his own siblings would want to kill him, but then take everything, strip his clothes, strip his position, and sell him into slavery. And yet he landed on his feet, and yes, he was always a slave, but he still rose to, as you said, high position in Potiphar's house. And then to be accused of a heinous crime like rape, be stripped again of his clothing, stripped of his position, and then thrown into a pit twice.
Yeah, that's right.
Twice. And then to a Jewish mind, they go, hang on a second, we're seeing a repeat here. Why is this so significant? So when you consider the fact that Joseph lost everything twice, and it included his clothing and his standing or status. When it comes to clothing, especially like robes, in the ancient cultures, the robe had a lot of significance with regard to authority, and the hem of somebody's robe could even be used as a signature, press into a clay seal. This was the hem that could prove authentication with regard to laws or permissions or denial of permissions or whatever.
And I guess it also has a bit to do with identity too, doesn't it?
Very much has a lot to do with identity. And so poor Joseph has his identity, his position, his standing, his status, everything taken away from him. Clothing, yes, but everything completely stripped, and twice.
That's right. And so I guess it's pretty significant when he finds himself in that prison, as you said, the second time stripped, the second time demoted, the second time in a pit,
Yep.
he would have been justified to think, my life's over, God's left me for dead, woe is me. But it seems to be that he just kept his heart and his character and his attitude right the whole way through.
And God was training him in incredible... I cannot imagine the emotional trauma and turmoil that he experienced. I mean, I know what it's like to be rejected by some people, but I have never been rejected by all people. And I know what it's like to be lied about by some people, but not by all people, because some people know me. They know the truth. I do know what it's like to lose some things, but I don't know what it's like to have everything taken from me, including the clothing that I'm wearing, and to be left with nothing. I can't even begin to compare. And, when you think about the culture that Joseph came from and then into the culture that he was then shoved into, basically, which is a very paganistic culture. I mean, he didn't have a pocket Bible that he could just pull out and read scriptures to encourage himself. He's going off memory now. And he never faltered.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just breathtaking. But, it was this total and complete breaking, the second time, that really transformed and remade Joseph to not only be used by God to save the nation that he was in at the time, which is Egypt, but to save his own people. Think about it. If Joseph had just been sold and rejected by his family and stayed in Potiphar's house and was never betrayed by Potiphar's wife, he would never have become the prime minister, and he would never have established the policy of saving all the grain that saved Egypt, but also saved his family.
That's
they
right.
would have died. The second time was necessary. The first time was this picture of being stripped of everything for replacement and training. The second time as well. I mean, it's kind of breathtaking, the scope of God's sovereignty and his plans, but this repetition of what was God doing? I mean, what was the point?
Yeah.
Well, we know in hindsight what the point was. Absolutely.
Well, the point was interesting because he actually, when he spoke to his brothers after he'd revealed himself to them, told them, and of course they were shaking in their boots thinking, this is going to be the end for us.
Especially when their dad died. He wasn't the buffer between them
that's
anymore.
right. Exactly.
Terrifying for them.
So it's interesting to see that Joseph, in all of that, had the perspective that God's been in this. You meant it for evil, but God was in it. And we read that in Genesis 50. And as you say, this is after his father had died. He said to them, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive. So therefore, don't be afraid. I'll provide for you and your little ones." So he comforted them and spoke kindly to them.
Isn't that just amazing? But, when I think, okay, the first time he could have risen in the ranks from Potiphar's house up into the position of prime minister if he'd caught the eye of Pharaoh or if Potiphar had promoted him or something. Why the second time? I think because there's a breaking that takes place where it may be, who knows, he was very righteous in his behaviour, but maybe there was a bitterness. I don't know, I'm just speculating now. But why the second time? Why the repeat of this process? Because the process of brokenness to get a person out of their own head and their own importance, trusting God. When you've got nothing and you've stuck in a pit in the ground or in a jail cell somewhere and you're innocent and you don't even have the clothes on your own back, what are you going to hang on to? It's got to be God so he can remake you. And he did that with Joseph. Joseph's life is just stunning, isn't it? I mean, it's just breathtaking, his example. But these repeats are something we need to just keep our eyes on them and search them out when we see them. And you might not find something straight away, but search again, dig a little deeper, and you'll be amazed at the treasures.
Well, that brings today's program to a close, but a reminder that you can listen back to today's episode and others that you might have missed via the free Vision app. If you don't already have it on your device, just search Vision Christian Media on your app store to download it. You can also listen again on our website. Just go to vision.org.au/foundations. We invite you to join us again next time. And if there's a topic that you'd like us to discuss on a future program, I encourage you to get in touch with us via the website vision.org.au/foundations.
This has been Foundations, a look at the Jewish foundations of our Christian faith. For study notes, resources and more, see vision.org.au/foundations.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.